Late in the glass-walled conference room, CEO, Alexandra Reed pretended to doze, testing the night shift janitor, Carter Williams, a single father. Thought she was asleep, he draped his jacket over her shoulders and leaned close, whispering words that froze her heart. "I couldn't save my wife, but I won't let anyone be alone again." Alexandra's eyes snapped open, pulse racing. The man this building dismissed had just touched the one scar she kept hidden, a wound no one dared name. The Reed Dynamics Tower rose 43 stories above Seattle's waterfront, all steel and smoked glass, its fluorescent veins burning through the wet November night. Inside, the merger clock was ticking. Alexandra Reed had built this company on discipline, precision, and one unbreakable rule: trust no one until they prove otherwise. At 34, she was the youngest woman to lead a Pacific Northwest logistics firm. Her calendar carved into 15-minute blocks, her reputation forged in the fires of quarterly earnings calls and boardroom battles, where sentiment was weakness and hesitation was failure. But beneath that armor lay a wound that never quite healed. 7 years ago, Alexandra had been in back-to-back negotiations in New York when her mother's heart stopped in a Seattle hospital. By the time she landed, the room was empty, the machine silent. She had been 90 minutes too late. Since then, sleep felt like betrayal, like the moment you let your guard down and lose what matters most. Her office light was always the last to go dark. Carter Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the 15th floor corridor, the wheels squeaking softly against polished tile. 35 years old, broad-shouldered and quiet, he moved through the building like a ghost, seen but never noticed. His daughter Lily, 8 years old and sharp as a tack, waited for him most nights in the ground-floor security office, drawing pictures under the watchful eye of the night guard. Carter had once been an aviation maintenance technician, his hands steady on turbine assemblies and hydraulic lines. But 3 years ago, his wife Vivian had died in a house fire. The smoke detector had failed. He had arrived 1 minute too late. 1 minute. The number haunted him still. He had made a promise at her grave, a vow whispered into the rain-soaked earth. He would never leave anyone behind again, not one single person. It was the only way he could live with himself. The only way he could look Lily in the eyes each morning and tell her the world was still good. Henry Cole, the company's chief financial officer, was a man of spreadsheets and sharp angles. At 42, he measured success in basis points and closure rates. The merger with Cascade Holdings was his masterpiece. A deal that would cement Reed Dynamics as the dominant player in West Coast supply chain management. He did not care about the poetry of it. He cared that the numbers sang. Serena Park, the head of human resources, was 33 and possessed a gift for reading people. She noticed things others missed. The way Alexandra's jaw tightened when someone mentioned family leave. The careful distance Carter kept from everyone. The way Henry's eyes went flat when ethics came up in meetings. She believed culture was built on trust, brick by fragile brick. Zane Miller, the external mergers and acquisitions partner, was polished, charming, and ambitious. At 38, he had orchestrated 17 acquisitions, each one smoother than the last. He knew how to make problems disappear, how to turn rough edges into sellable narratives. He was very good at his job. Lily Williams drew with fierce concentration, her colored pencils moving across paper in confident strokes. She saw the world in symbols, light, shadows, the places where things did not quite fit. She was her father's compass, the small, clear voice that kept him honest. 3 conflicts simmered beneath the surface, invisible to most but felt by those who paid attention. Inside Alexandra, fear wrestled with control. She was terrified of missing the moment that mattered, of being absent when the world asked her to show up. Inside Carter, guilt fought redemption. He had failed once, and the weight of that failure shaped every choice he made. Between them stretched the canyon of class, the unspoken hierarchy that said a CEO and a janitor lived in different worlds, even when they walked the same halls. And beneath it all, hidden in electrical panels and late-night server rooms, a third conflict waited. The energy consumption reports were beautiful, almost too perfect. The ESG scores gleamed. The building's carbon footprint had miraculously dropped 18% in the past 6 months, right on schedule for the merger's sustainability benchmarks. But in the basement, on a monitoring panel, no one bothered to check. The numbers told a different story. Floors listed as vacant still drew power. Strange spikes at odd hours. Usage that did not match the access logs. Alexandra had glanced at the readout once, her mind already racing ahead to the next meeting. She had not stopped to wonder why. The cameras in certain hallways had blind spots, small zones where the angles did not quite overlap. Most people never noticed. Carter did. He noticed everything. It was 9:47 on a Thursday night when Alexandra Reed made her choice. The merger due diligence team would arrive in 72 hours. The building needed to be perfect, every system checked, every document in order. She had spent the evening in Conference Room B, a glass box overlooking the city, reviewing contracts until the words blurred. But instead of going home, she stayed. She dimmed the lights, arranged herself on the leather sofa, scattered merger documents around her like props, and closed her eyes. She wanted to see what people did when they thought no one was watching. Carter arrived at 10:15, his cart stocked with microfiber cloths, glass cleaner, and a checklist that never varied. He moved methodically, wiping down the table, checking the outlets for loose connections, adjusting the floor mat so no one would trip on the edge. He had learned long ago that small details mattered, that a loose wire or a misaligned threshold could be the difference between safe and sorry. He noticed the woman on the sofa, her breathing slow and even, her face softer in sleep than he had ever seen it in the harsh light of day. Alexandra Reed, the woman who ran this place, with an iron fist and a calculator for a heart, or so everyone said. But Carter had learned not to trust everyone. He saw the crease between her eyebrows, the tension even sleep could not erase, the way her hand was curled into a fist, as if holding on to something invisible. It was cold in the room. The building's climate control always overcompensated at night. Carter looked at the jacket on the back of his cart, the worn canvas one he had bought at a second-hand store because the good coats were for Lily's school clothes, not for him. He hesitated only a moment before draping it over Alexandra's shoulders. Then he did something he had done 1,000 times in his mind, at Vivian's grave, in the dark hours when Lily was asleep and the house was too quiet. He leaned close and whispered the promise he could never quite keep but refused to abandon. I couldn't save my wife, but I won't let anyone be alone again. Alexandra's eyes opened, not slowly, not groggy, but instantly, her pupils contracting in the dim light, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. The man straightened, startled, taking a step back. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapped against the glass, a rhythm older than ambition, older than grief. She sat up slowly, Carter's jacket sliding from her shoulders. She caught it, the fabric still warm, smelling faintly of laundry detergent and something else. Something human and real. Thank you, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Carter nodded, his face carefully neutral. Didn't mean to wake you, ma'am. I'll finish up and get out of your way. But Alexandra was not thinking about the cleaning. She was thinking about the whisper, the words that had sliced through her defenses like a blade through silk. He could not save his wife. The weight of that sentence, the specificity of it, the fact that he had said it out loud to someone he thought was unconscious. She wanted to ask. She did not. Instead, she filed the moment away, a small bright coin of information, and let him finish his work in silence. That night, she looked up his personnel file. Carter Williams, single parent, hired 3 years ago, perfect attendance, 0 complaints, 0 commendations either, because who commends a janitor? The next morning, Alexandra made a decision that surprised even herself. She called Carter into her office, a sleek space on the 40th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a painting. He stood in the doorway, uncomfortable, his uniform pressed, but his eyes weary. I need someone to run a safety checklist for the due diligence team, she said, her tone brisk, professional. You move through this building more than anyone. You see things others miss. I want a full report. Electrical, mechanical, anything that might raise a flag. Can you do that? Carter blinked. I'm not an inspector, ma'am, but you were a maintenance technician. Aviation, correct? She had read his resume. It was thin but solid. Yes, ma'am. Then you know how to spot a problem before it becomes one. I need that skill, 48 hours. Can you do it? He could. He did not know why she was asking him, but he could feel the weight of the request, the strange trust embedded in it. Yes, ma'am. Good. Report directly to me. No one else. As he left, Serena Park caught his eye from across the open floor. She had been watching the interaction, her instincts humming. Something had shifted. Carter started that night, moving through the building with new purpose. He checked breaker panels, compared energy logs from the facility's database against actual usage, traced conduit runs, and tested emergency lighting. And slowly, carefully, the discrepancies began to emerge. Floor 12, listed as vacant for renovations, was pulling 17 kilowatts at odd hours. The backup power system was generating voltage spikes that smoothed out perfectly in the official reports, too perfectly, as if someone had scrubbed the data. He found the first physical evidence 2 nights later. A junction box in the basement mechanical room with fresh solder marks and a firmware update sticker dated 3 weeks ago, signed off by a facilities account that did not match the usual technician roster. The modifications were subtle, a bypass circuit that fed false readings into the monitoring system while the real load continued unabated. Meanwhile, Alexandra tested him in smaller ways. She left her wallet on a bench in the ground floor lobby, $500 inside, her driver's license, 3 credit cards. Carter found it at 11:37 that night. He returned it the next morning, complete with a handwritten note listing the exact location, time of discovery, and the name of the security guard who had witnessed him pick it up. She tested him again on a Tuesday night, when she knew he picked up Lily from aftercare at 6. She texted him an urgent request. A power load measurement on floor 22, needed by 7. Carter responded immediately. He would collect his daughter first and return by 7:30 to complete the task. He did not lie. He did not cut corners. He simply stated his priority and kept his word to both. Serena noticed. She added a note to Alexandra's file, a single line of recommendation. Consider trust-based delegation. This one keeps promises. But the data Carter was gathering was beginning to paint a troubling picture. He cross-referenced 3 sources: the historical energy consumption logs, the ESG commitment reports filed as part of the merger package, and the raw access logs from the electrical control panels. They did not align. The backup power system was not just feeding false readings. It was masking real-time consumption with synthetic data pulses that hit target metrics perfectly. As if someone had programmed the building to lie. He found the smoking gun in the firmware itself. The building management system had been updated outside of standard maintenance protocols. The digital signature belonged to a management account, not a technician, and the update had been deployed precisely 6 months ago, right when the merger talks began. Lily had been with him that night, sitting on the floor of the mechanical room with her sketch pad while her father worked. She drew the control panel, capturing details she did not understand. The small red indicator light in the corner that blinked in a pattern, the scorch mark near the relay housing, the bundle of wires that looked newer than the rest. She showed the picture to Carter later. "Daddy, why is that light blinking? None of the others do." Carter looked at the drawing, then back at the panel. The light only activated when the bypass circuit was engaged. His daughter, without knowing it, had just identified the telltale marker of an active fraud. He compiled everything into a report: photographs, log comparisons, a timeline of the firmware update, and a simple conclusion. The building's energy profile had been artificially manipulated to meet sustainability benchmarks. The real consumption was 18% higher than reported. If a fire inspector or an independent auditor looked closely, the entire merger could collapse under the weight of falsified data. He delivered the report to Alexandra at 6:00 the morning, catching her as she arrived, coffee in hand, her face drawn from another sleepless night. She read it in silence, her expression shifting from skepticism to alarm to something harder, something that looked like resolve. "Who else knows?" she asked. "No one. You said report to you only." "Good. Keep it that way." She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she saw past the uniform, past the title, to the man who had just handed her a grenade with the pin already pulled. This could end the deal. "Yes, ma'am. It could cost people their jobs. Including yours." Carter met her Gaza. "I know. Why give it to me then?" He thought of Vivian, of the smoke detector that had failed, of the systems that were supposed to protect people but sometimes, quietly, did not. "Because someone needs to know. And because you asked." Alexandra made a choice in that moment, the kind of choice that defines what kind of leader you actually are when the pressure is on. She could bury the report, push the deal through, and deal with the consequences later, or she could follow the truth, even if it burned everything down. She thought of her mother, of the moment she had missed, of all the times she had prioritized the wrong things. She thought of Carter's whisper, the vow he had made to never leave anyone behind. And she decided. "We go with the truth," she said quietly. "Prepare to back up those logs. We're going to need proof that can stand up in court." But the moment she made that decision, the forces arrayed against it began to move. Henry Cole appeared in her office that afternoon, his smile tight, his tone casual. "I heard you've been running some extracurricular audits. Anything I should know about?" Alexandra kept her face neutral. "Just due diligence. Making sure we're clean. Of course. But you know, if there are any minor discrepancies, it might be better to address them after the deal closes. No need to spook the buyers over paperwork." Minor discrepancies. Henry's smile did not reach his eyes. "You know how these systems are. Always some lag between reporting and reality. Nothing material. But it was material, and they both knew it." That evening, Zane Miller requested a private meeting. He took her to a steakhouse downtown, all dark wood and low lighting. The kind of place where deals were made and secrets were kept. Over expensive wine, he laid out a vision. The merger would proceed. Everyone would get their bonuses. The company would thrive. All she had to do was trust the process. If you start digging, he said gently, you'll find things. You always do. But the question is, what serves the greater good? A perfect audit, or a successful deal that secures jobs for 800 people? It was a seductive argument, the kind that let you sleep at night, by reframing cowardice as pragmatism. Alexandra felt the pull of it, the ease of letting someone else carry the weight. But then she thought of Carter, of the way he had returned her wallet down to the smallest detail, of the way he had prioritized his daughter and still kept his promise to her. I need to think about it, she said. Zane smiled. Of course. Take your time. Just remember, we're on the same side. But Serena Park was gathering her own evidence. An anonymous tip delivered to her office mailbox included photographs of invoicing records, payments to a shell contractor with ties to Henry's brother-in-law. The work listed: Energy Systems Optimization Consulting. The dates aligned perfectly with the firmware update. She forwarded the information to Alexandra with a single line. You need to see this. Alexandra stood in her office late that night. The city spread out below her like a circuit board, all lights and connections and hidden currents. She looked at herself in the glass, the reflection of a woman who had built her life on control, on the belief that if you just worked hard enough, planned well enough, you could prevent loss. But control was an illusion. The only thing you could control was what you did when the illusion shattered. She texted Carter. Prepare to restore the system to factory standard. Full backup of all logs. Timestamped. Checksummed. Sealed. He replied immediately. Understood. They worked through the night, Carter and a trusted security technician, cloning the server logs, photographing the bypass circuits, documenting every connection. Serena arranged the legal framework, ensuring that whistleblower protections were in place, that the evidence chain was unimpeachable. And Alexandra drafted a 3-step plan. First, restore the building systems to accurate reporting. Second, set a digital tripwire in the monitoring software, a token that would log any attempt to re-access the compromised systems. Third, stage a meeting with Henry and Zane, allow them to incriminate themselves on a legally recorded call, and then present everything to the due diligence team. It was Lily who provided the final piece. She had drawn another picture, this one of the control panel at night, capturing the precise moment when the fault indicator blinked. Carter studied the drawing, and realized the light blinked every 73 minutes, time to avoid shift changes and security sweeps. He used that pattern to predict when the perpetrators would next access the system. Tomorrow night, 11:15, right before the due diligence team's final walkthrough. They set the trap. At 8 the next morning, the due diligence team arrived, a quartet of sharp-eyed analysts with checklists and tablets. Alexandra greeted them with coffee and confidence, playing the role of the prepared CEO. But in the basement, Carter was already at work, a fire extinguisher and emergency breathing mask within reach, restoring the electrical systems one circuit at a time. At 10:48, the fire alarm in the supposedly vacant 12th floor started chirping, a low intermittent warning. Smoke, faint and acrid, began seeping into the hallway. Carter, monitoring from the control room, saw the power surge as someone tried to override the emergency shutdown, forcing the compromised circuits to keep running. He grabbed his equipment and ran, not away from the smoke, but toward it. Alexandra, alerted by the alarm, ordered an immediate evacuation. The due diligence team filed out calmly, practiced in corporate fire drills. But Carter was moving against the crowd, up the stairs, his breath steady, his mind clear. He found Zane Miller in the mechanical room on 12, frantically trying to disconnect a jury-rigged voltage regulator before the fire crews arrived. The smoke was thicker here, billowing from an overheating transformer that had been pushed far beyond its rated capacity. Zane spun, saw Carter, and his polished demeanor cracked. "This is none of your business." Carter did not argue. He hit the manual cutoff for the floor, threw the fire suppression switch, and grabbed Zane's arm. "We're leaving now." But the exit was blocked, the stairwell filled with smoke. Zane stumbled, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet floor, panic overtaking calculation. Carter looked at him, this man who had built a career on making problems disappear, now trapped by his own scheme. He thought of Vivian, of the minute that had mattered, of the promise he had made. "I don't owe you anything," Zane gasped, coughing. "No," Carter agreed. "But I owe myself." He pulled the mop cord from his cart, the industrial-grade nylon he used for heavy floors, and looped it through a steel support beam, creating a makeshift safety line. He wrapped the other end around Zane's waist, then his own, and guided them both toward the secondary exit, moving by memory and instinct through the smoke. Alexandra appeared at the far end of the corridor, a wet cloth over her face, her eyes searching. She saw them, saw what Carter was doing, and understood. She opened the fire door, holding it against the pressure, giving them a clear path out. They emerged into the stairwell, gasping, the alarm wailing around them. Fire crews pushed past, heading in. Alexandra looked at Carter, at the man who had just saved his accuser, and felt something in her chest crack open, something that had been sealed for 7 years. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Carter wiped his face, smearing soot across his cheek. "Yes, I did." Behind them, Henry Cole was being intercepted by security, a USB drive in his pocket containing access logs that matched the compromised systems. Serena had tipped off the fire marshal, who had brought an electrical inspector. The evidence was everywhere, undeniable, documented in real time, as the building's lies finally caught fire. The next morning, Alexandra convened an emergency board meeting. The due diligence team was there, along with representatives from Cascade Holdings, legal counsel, and a fire safety investigator. She stood at the head of the table, no notes, no PowerPoint, just the truth. She presented the electrical schematics, the log comparisons, the photographs Carter had taken, the hash-verified timestamps that proved data manipulation. She showed them the firmware signature, the invoice trail, the pattern of access that led directly to Henry Cole and Zane Miller. She explained how the building had been rigged to lie, how the sustainability numbers that made the merger so attractive were built on a foundation of fraud. "We could have buried this," she said, her voice steady. "We could have closed the deal, taken the money, and dealt with the consequences later. But that's not the company I want to lead. Profit built on deception is not profit. It's theft. And it's not sustainable." Henry and Zane were placed on immediate administrative leave, pending criminal investigation. The merger was paused, pending an independent audit. Some board members were furious, others were quietly relieved. The truth, as always, was expensive. But Alexandra did something else that day. She offered Carter a new position, safety systems engineer, with a salary that would let him put Lily through college, flexible hours that would let him be present for school plays and parent-teacher conferences, and a mandate to rebuild the building's integrity from the ground up. "I don't have the credentials," Carter said. "You have something better," Alexandra replied. "You have principles. And you don't leave people behind." Later, in the privacy of her office, she told him about the test, about pretending to sleep. "I wanted to see what you would do." Carter nodded slowly. "And what did you see?" "Someone who keeps his promises, even the ones I couldn't keep." Alexandra looked at him, at the man who carried his wife's memory like a second heartbeat. And she made a confession of her own. "I missed my mother's last hour because I was in a meeting. I told myself the work mattered more. It didn't." They stood in silence, two people bound by the weight of being too late, by the determination to never be too late again. "That whisper," Alexandra said quietly. "Did you mean it?" "Every word." 3 months later, Reed Dynamics launched the Vivian Williams Safety Fund, a nonprofit initiative providing free smoke detectors, carbon monoxide alarms, and safety inspections for low-income housing across Seattle. The first 1,000 installations were funded by Alexandra personally. The program was named after Carter's wife, and the logo was designed by Lily, a small light in the darkness, simple and bright. Lily's artwork now hung in the building's main lobby, a traveling exhibition of her drawings. One piece, titled Light in the Dark, showed the control panel from that night, the fault indicator glowing like a tiny star. Alexandra stopped in front of it often, sometimes for minutes at a time, studying the details only a child would notice, the truths hidden in plain sight. At the company's annual meeting, Alexandra stood before 800 employees and told the story, not sparing herself, not spinning it into corporate mythology. She thanked Carter by name in front of everyone, and her voice wavered just once when she said, "He reminded me what integrity looks like when it costs you something." The applause was long and genuine. Carter stood in the back, uncomfortable with the attention, his hand resting on Lily's shoulder. She beamed, proud in the way only an 8-year-old can be when her father is recognized for being exactly who he is. After the meeting, Alexandra found them in the lobby. She had turned off her phone, silenced the constant pulse of emails and meetings, and allowed herself to simply be present. "Lily's having an art show next week," Carter said. "At her school. It's small, just parents and teachers. But if you wanted to come, I'll be there," Alexandra said, and she meant it. The rain had stopped, and through the glass walls of the tower, the city gleamed, washed clean. Alexandra stood beside Carter and his daughter, three people learning the same difficult lesson. That trust is not given freely, it is built one choice at a time, one promise kept, one moment, when you choose to show up, instead of turning away. They were still learning. They would always be learning. But for the first time in years, Alexandra believed they might actually get it right. The night janitor and the CEO, separated by titles and tax brackets, and every unspoken rule about who matters and who does not, had found a different kind of currency. The knowledge that every person carries a grief, a wound, a vow, and sometimes, in the deep hours when the city sleeps, a whispered promise is enough to change everything.